At 57, Keith Urban stands beneath the spotlight, smiling through the applause, but behind that shine is a storm few ever saw coming. To the world, he's the electrifying country music icon, the chart topper, the heartthrob with a guitar. But fame has a way of hiding the deepest wounds. Beneath the stage lights and red carpets lies a man who battled demons most wouldn't survive. Addiction, identity, pressure to perform perfection, it all nearly broke him. What the cameras didn't capture was the silent struggle that consumed his soul. This is the heartbreaking truth behind the man millions thought had it all. Behind the glittering success and sold-out concerts lies a past Keith Urban rarely speaks of, a haunting reality shaped by addiction, domestic turmoil, and emotional wounds that never truly faded. "I break out in cuffs," he once said with a bitter laugh, a chilling truth buried in a joke. For decades, the world saw a polished performer, but few knew the chaos that churned beneath the surface. What you're about to witness isn't just the truth behind Keith Urban's name, it's a raw, unsettling journey through pain, trauma, and survival, finally coming into focus. Born on October 26, 1967, in Whangarei, New Zealand, Keith was the youngest of 2 children. At the age of 2, his family relocated to Queensland, Australia, settling in a working-class suburb of Brisbane. On the outside, they ran a small convenience store. On the inside, the family home was filled with unspoken tension and hidden struggles, emotional battles that would leave deep scars on a young boy trying to find his place in the world. Keith would later reveal how those early years shaped not just his music, but his fight to stay alive in the face of fame's crushing weight. Keith Urban's childhood was shadowed by a deeply troubled home life, dominated by the presence of his father, Robert Urban, a man who, despite his charm and polished appearance, battled a relentless addiction to alcohol. "He always smelled good, looked good, he was a badass," Keith once recalled, but he was an addict. Beneath that composed exterior was a man struggling with demons that often spilled into the household, creating an environment marked by emotional volatility and dysfunction. In a candid interview with The Boot, Keith admitted, "My dad was an alcoholic, and so that has its dysfunctional raising." Those words barely scratched the surface of a childhood steeped in quiet suffering. The emotional instability at home left lasting scars on Keith's psyche. He spoke openly about the sense of abandonment and emotional distance he felt growing up, haunted by the gaze of a father who seemed more present in his own battles than in his son's life. "I wished he'd stared at me like that," Keith once said, hinting at a yearning for connection that never came. This deep, unresolved pain planted the seeds of insecurity early on, forcing him to retreat inward. The pressures at home weren't just from addiction, they came wrapped in psychological strain, unspoken expectations, and silent emotional violence. As a child, Keith learned to escape through solitude, building emotional walls that would follow him into adulthood, even as his star began to rise. His only source of stability during the most trying times of his early years was music. When Keith was 6 years old, he started taking guitar lessons. He was greatly impacted by his father, a man who was both a source of scars that were difficult to cure and an inspiration to artists. "Every day I see a little more of my father in me," Urban once said, expressing the complicated mixture of pride and anguish over his father's influence on his life. Reputable publications like Rolling Stone have said that Keith Urban's father was violent and nasty, fostering a tense, silent, tearful, and perpetually lonely atmosphere. Keith Urban eventually had to acknowledge that his early years had been marred by unsaid suffering. 10 years ago, I would have said he never did anything wrong," he admitted in one interview. That illustrates how the young, wounded boy is denied. After years of emotional evasion and denial, he was finally able to confront his own past as an adult. Despite coming from a dysfunctional family, Keith Urban never stopped looking for chances to show off his musical prowess. He took first place at Australia's biggest country music competition, the Tamworth Country Music Festival, in 1983. At the age of 6, Keith began his professional acting career that same year when he made his television debut on Reg Lindsay's Country Homestead. Individuals. Urban formally joined the music industry in 1990 after landing his first recording deal. Early on in his career, Keith had to face disappointment and the possibility of losing his passion after his band, The Ranch, flopped in the marketplace. At first glance, the Australian media took notice of Keith Urban as a young, bright talent. In actuality, he was still burdened by his family and loneliness. Keith Urban was raised in unfavorable conditions, but they strengthened his fortitude and capacity to bounce back from setbacks. The early years turned into a protracted process of tenacity, fortitude, and reality-based learning. Keith Urban realized that the only way he could actually take charge of his future was to conquer himself. A strong personality was formed by his father's wounds, the strain from his family history, and the lingering sense of loneliness. Someone who can bounce back from setbacks and keep looking for fresh chances. Keith Urban left Kabul with recollections of a difficult upbringing and a strong determination to succeed, aiming for Nashville, the city of enormous hopes and the location of even more difficult obstacles. The darkness and the American dream. Keith Urban formally moved to Nashville, USA, from Australia in 1992 in order to start over in his career. Keith had to live in a low-income area and share a room with a cocaine addict during his early years there, which presented a number of unrelenting obstacles. Keith Urban was initially exposed to and progressively became embroiled in the temptations of alcohol and drugs under these conditions. Keith talked about this difficult time in an interview with Vocal Media, explaining that he was turned down more than 10 times before landing a deal with Capitol Records in 1999. Keith's addiction spiraled deeper and harder to control as a result of the strain of earning a living and his recurrent failures. His physical and mental health drastically deteriorated throughout this time. Records show that Keith Urban used alcohol and cocaine virtually non-stop starting in the early 1990s, and he was hospitalized twice for serious problems. The first took place in 1998 in Cumberland Heights in Nashville, and the second took place in 2006 at the Betty Ford Center in California. Keith had to go to rehab 3 times in all, with each treatment lasting 6 to 9 months. Looking back at the catastrophic effects of his 2006 relapse on himself and his family, Keith Urban candidly reflected on today and acknowledged that I was the reason his new marriage failed. He was also frank in his speech. I didn't realize I was an alcoholic for a long time. Unlike my dad, I didn't drink. Music continued to be Keith Urban's most important lifeline throughout this period, assisting him in facing reality. Numerous songs with intensely psychological and intimate themes surfaced, including Nobody Drinks Alone, 2004, and You're Not My God, 2002. Both demonstrate his continuous struggle with inner darkness. Music was always my way out, my way to keep going forward, Keith once said. A portion of his clarity and integrity were maintained throughout the crisis by his perseverance in creating and performing songs despite his ongoing struggles with temptation. In retrospect, Keith Urban's U.S. career was by no means a run of unbroken hits. Deep disappointment, emotional wounds, and the ongoing fear of losing himself were the price paid for each new opportunity. Keith Urban had several moments of feeling like giving up since his efforts seemed to be constantly hindered by old wounds. Nevertheless, he managed to maintain hope because of his audience, his connection to music, and his tenuous confidence in a different tomorrow. Holding on to family love and faith while still not totally recovered became the real battle as the biggest temptations eventually subsided. Urban lay ahead of Keith, a new chapter full of even more difficult decisions as love and loss merged, laying the groundwork for all of the pivotal moments in his life. Fissures that haven't healed. Keith Urban's encounter with Nicole Kidman at the Good Day USA Gala in Los Angeles in January 2005 marked a significant turning point in his life. The two immediately connected deeply and started a covert relationship while being closely watched by the media. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman became engaged just 5 months later, and on June 25, 2006, they had a small wedding in Sydney. However, their bliss was put to the test right away. Keith Urban started to exhibit symptoms of a relapse into cocaine and alcohol use after the honeymoon. Nicole Kidman saw odd changes in her spouse and refused to allow the issue to get out of hand. Insomnia, erratic moods, and an increasing estrangement from family. Nicole discreetly contacted a California rehabilitation professional and aggressively planned an intervention in October 2006, according to Keith Urban and close pals. Despite Keith Urban's strong reaction and denial of the issue, Nicole, her family, and close friends convinced him to attend the Betty Ford Center that very evening. Nicole's tenacity and steadfast assistance turned out to be pivotal. In order to help Keith understand the importance of genuine family ties, she put her entire film career on hold, relocated near the treatment facility, wrote personal letters, supplied daily encouragement, and physically took her own daughter to visit him. In an interview with People, Keith Urban acknowledged that he was in therapy after 3 months. "I'm in rehab 4 months into a marriage. Try that out if you want to see what true love looks like in action." Nicole Kidman didn't say nothing. "I married to get through everything together," she said bluntly to the reporters. True love is about sticking with each other through difficult times, not only being together while things are easy. Nicole described Keith as a rock of a husband, in an interview with Pop Sugar, highlighting the value of integrity, self-control, and company in maintaining happiness and promoting psychological healing. Sunday Rose, Keith and Nicole's first daughter, was born in 2008, shortly after those difficulties. Faith Margaret was born via surrogacy in 2010. When Keith was happy, he once said, "I love having girls. They have never before attended a concert." On Father's Day in 2025, both daughters made their stage debut alongside their father, giving the tiny family a unique and touching photo. In addition to being a memorable occasion for Keith Urban, it also demonstrated their will to face hardship head-on and maintain their family's unity. Keith Urban continued to experience severe personal losses following a long period of physical and mental difficulties. Keith's father died from cancer in 2015. There was a huge hole left by the man who had plagued his early years leaving. As Keith expressed at the burial, "I am so deeply grateful that Dad is not suffering anymore." Keith and the rest of the crew were shocked when his tour manager, Randy Baja Fletcher, passed away in an accident shortly before a gig in 2021. "We are in a deep state of grief," Keith Urban said of the family's profound mourning following the death of his mother-in-law, Janelle Kidman, in 2024. With every loss, Keith Urban had to face himself, go back on the past, and look for ways to get better. His sole means of overcoming his sadness was music. His path of emotional release is embodied in the song Break the Chain, which also conveys the message of ending generational grief cycles. According to Keith Urban, grief comes in waves. Following such a significant shift, he made the decision to prioritize his family, maintain a healthy lifestyle, cut back on risky hobbies, and learn to value each time spent with his wife and kids. Keith Urban has moved past his own conflicts and is now dealing with a completely different kind of pressure. He is being pushed into a new conflict between social media and reality by an impending tsunami of untrue stories. The crisis's real cause. As rumors of Keith Urban's death began to circulate alarmingly on social media in 2023, he abruptly became the focus of attention. Millions of fans around the world were in a panic after fake messages saying Keith Urban had died kept popping up on Facebook, Twitter, and even pages posing as fact-checking groups. Consistent with Snopes, within a quick time, the phrase Keith City Dead became one of the most up-to-date Seek subjects, creating chaos throughout fan pages and U.S. tune groups. Going through this wave of false information, Keith City and his own family selected to stay silent. His public members of the family crew and Control Fast denied all rumors, affirming that he remained healthful and actively pursuing his music career. Snopes also fully debunked the misinformation, mentioning rumors claiming the singer died in December 2023 had been nothing but a hoax. Despite the fact that, the mental impact of these rumors was large, especially for Keith City's loved ones, those who had already persevered actual losses within the own family, and now faced public stress and fear for his or her relative. This changed into no longer the primary time Keith City have become entangled in fake rumors, but 2023 marked the height while these fabrications became more sophisticated and perilous. In a single announcement, Keith Urban acknowledged that this case did no longer show up simplest to him, but pondered. A broader reality faced by way of many modern celebrities. Dying rumors not best inflicted emotional damage, but also disrupted his creative and overall performance sports, forcing Keith to learn how to adapt and maintain resilience amid invisible attacks from social media. The general public. Time and again wondered Keith City's response, but in place of accomplishing disputes, he centered on paintings maintaining himself and his family far from the terrible spiral of fake news. This preference helped Keith shield his private peace even as proving his internal electricity after years of overcoming real lifestyle's hardships. The real tragedy Keith Urban confronted became no longer the malicious rumors or fake articles, however the compounded feelings of ache and loss invisible to outsiders. When vintage wounds remained unhealed, being declared lifeless more than one instances through social media introduced huge psychological pressure, compelling Keith City over again to heal himself via song creativity and steadfast commitment to his selected direction. After these upheavals, Keith City completely shifted his awareness to music projects, reduced media appearances, and devoted extra time to own family. The wave of false news did no longer carry him down. On the contrary, it became a riding pressure for him to reaffirm his cause through every musical paintings and level performance. Returned on the racetrack, the year 2024 marked a major turning point in Keith City's profession with the discharge of his album High, providing 12 tracks. In its first week inside the US, the album bought 1,700 copies, fast getting into the pinnacle 10 of the country charts, ranking 38 on the Billboard 200 and reaching quantity 6 on the album income chart. Industrial achievement persevered to grow whilst excessive became venerated as the top promoting Australian U.S. album at the 2025 Golden Guitar Awards. These figures no longer simplest demonstrate Keith City's strong have an effect on after almost 3 decades inside the enterprise, however also verify his standing inside the international music marketplace. Along the brand new album, Keith City released the High and Alive tour in 2025, appearing approximately 40 shows continuously from North the United States to Australia. Primary venues like the Inuit Dome in LP, Rogers area in Vancouver, and Budweiser Level in Toronto were continuously sold out. But Keith also chose to convey his track to smaller tiers inclusive of the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto, keeping near connections along with his lovers. Every overall performance attracted thousands with energetic atmospheres, proving Keith City's enduring attraction. Having persevered many demanding situations, Keith Urban chose to stand non-public pain through song in preference to avoid it. In an interview with American Songwriter, he said, "The factor that helped me the maximum in restoration was being capable of separate the addict from the person." He acknowledged, "Tune is healing. It makes me experience vulnerable but proper to myself." This era also saw Keith openly proportion approximately his own family on social media, often posting photographs with his spouse and children, simple, meaningful moments like a Christmas circle of relatives photograph with the message, "From our own family to you, advantages." Keith Cities have an effect on extends past awards and charts into the real community. Many fanatics openly shared on social media how Keith's songs helped them via dark instances, mainly tracks like Destroy the Chain and the compositions from Excessive. Severa restoration support campaigns and dependency testimonies unfold broadly after Keith publicly shared his stories in worldwide media and social networks. Records from Music Cares show a super growth in participation in healing applications following activities proposing Keith Urban, mainly in fundamental shows throughout North the United States and Australia. Behind the scenes on tour. Keith Urban is incredibly esteemed by means of his crew and co-workers for his openness and willingness to pay attention to the issues of band members, young artists, and technical staff. According to band participants, Keith often spends time after indicates, meeting enthusiasts suffering with mental health or addiction troubles, truly listening and inspiring absolutely everyone personally. He also collaborates with his spouse Nicole Kidman, organizing private intellectual fitness discussions for teenagers, the use of their personal story to inspire others to searching for help and no longer surrender. Family performs a significant position in every exchange in Keith City's existence. In spite of a worrying excursion schedule, he prioritizes time for his spouse and 2 daughters, collaborating in simple sports like park walks, guitar instructions, or amassing together after every excursion. For Keith, own family isn't handiest an area to return to, however the most crucial support that sustains his will to recover and his non-stop dedication to track. With plans to launch new music tasks and proportion more approximately his adventure overcoming adversity in network talks, Keith City demonstrates the resilience of an artist who is going beyond the level lights to surely inspire actual life, spreading messages of authenticity, dealing with the beyond, growing once more, and actively shaping the future. Past the stage, Keith Urban spreads the spirit of healing through community sports, supporting programs like Music Cares and motivating thousands of fans to percentage their stories of overcoming dependency. Following Excessive, many fans publicly expressed gratitude and mentioned their personal healing trips, contributing to an effective wave of fine will to stay. For Keith, City Song is not only a profession, however, an apology to his circle of relatives, a protection for beyond errors, and a manner to heal psychological wounds. The power of art deepens his bond with Nicole Kidman and their kids whilst maintaining his electricity to triumph over all demanding situations. Below the level lights, Keith City is not most effective a rustic tune famous person, however a symbol of rebirth, a bright testimony to the determination to rise from the depths of ache. When you have ever felt lost or stood at a crossroads like Keith City, percentage your tale inside the remarks below. Take into account to enroll in our channel so you may not miss upcoming reports at the energy, tune, and lifestyles backstage of worldwide stars. Hit like and spread this video in case you trust every tragedy can emerge as a driving force.